Hi, and welcome back to this CWC Age podcast where leadership, mentorship, and lean thinking meet real world growth. I'm Chris, and whether you're a CEO, a business owner, graduate, or just hungry to grow, this is where you'll find insights that push you forward. Welcome back to this CWC Age podcast. I'm Chris, and as always, I'm thrilled to be here. And today, we're going to tackle something every single one of us faces, but do you know what? Almost nobody enjoys it. What do you imagine it is? Awkward conversations. Think about it. You've probably had one this week, last month. Maybe it was a colleague you were challenging because they're not pulling their weight. Maybe it was you were given feedback that you knew wouldn't be received well from the opposite party. Maybe it was with a friend or a family member where you had to say something uncomfortable. Leaders, business owners, graduates, service leavers, nobody is exempt from these conversations, people. And yet most people either they avoid them or they handle them in a way that creates more conflict than connection. Here's the good news. There's a way to approach these moments with confidence, with empathy and clarity, so that instead of creating distance, they actually build trust. Today I'll share the biggest mistakes people make, the strategies that work for me and for others, and some real stories from the people I've mentored over the years. These are CEOs and SME leaders, graduates, service members, service leavers, all of whom have had to face awkward conversations. And I've been one of them, head on. Let's be honest, awkward conversations, they're uncomfortable because they tap into fear. Fear of rejection, fear of damaging a relationship with the other person that you're having that awkward conversation with, fear of conflict, fear of not being liked. And for leaders, there's that added pressure, the fear of losing credibility or, oh, look at me, that authority figure. For graduates or early career professionals, again, it's the fear of being too bold too soon. I remember mentoring a young council member. I should really stop calling her a council member. She's a graduate who works for a local council in the south of the country in the United Kingdom, who needed to challenge a colleague about transparency in a project. She put it off for weeks and weeks. The longer she delayed, the bigger the issue grew. We've all can relate to this. When they finally had the conversation, however, it wasn't as bad as what they thought. But by then, the trust had already eroded between her and them. That's the problem with avoiding the awkward conversations early. Delay sometimes, and probably more times than not, usually makes things worse. So what happens when we avoid these conversations? 3 things usually show up. 1, your small problems become massive or bigger problems. The employee or your friend who misses a deadline, that doesn't magically improve their deadline capability. Without feedback, you have to have the conversations. Resentment builds when you stay silent. Frustration simmers. Eventually, it explodes, often in very, very unhelpful ways. And your trust breaks down. People know when something's wrong. If you don't address it, they stop trusting your leadership or your honesty. I've mentored a CEO who avoided addressing a toxic high performer because, well, he said to me they were too valuable within his organization. I would like to challenge that. However, within a year, that one individual had driven out 3 other talented team members. The cost of avoidance was enormous for him. Lessons learned was, avoiding those awkward conversations. It doesn't protect you. It weakens you. So how do we do it better then? Why am I giving you this advice? Why am I talking about it on this podcast? And what principles can, be used to affect good conversations? Let me give you 5 principles for handling awkward conversations well. 1, clarity before conversation. Know exactly what the issue is. Vague feedback, that creates a lot of defensiveness. And specifics create that clarity that's required. 2, start with the intent. Begin by making your positive intent clear. I want to help us to work better together. Could be a really good opening line for some people. Or, I really like what you've done there, but I think you should probably do this so we don't waste any more energy or time or money in the business. Balance honesty with empathy is your number 3. Say what needs to be said, but remember this, say it with respect, please. Direct doesn't mean being harsh. 4, listen actively. Give the other person space to respond, not just a one-shot go. Sometimes the story in your head isn't really that full picture when you start to actually engage in conversation and learn a few home truths. And number 5, the last one, agree the next steps. Don't just unload your frustration and that awkward conversation and then get up and leave. End with a clear agreement, even if you disagree. End with a clear agreement on what needs to change or what changes are going to happen to go forward. I used this framework with a graduate, the same graduate who had to confront their manager about being overloaded with work. And that's quite common for young graduates. They feared it would sound like complaining. She was adamant that they would probably try and get rid of her because she's complaining and probably not doing what the other people were doing before her. But because she framed it with an intent, stating, and we got to this intent quite quickly with her, stating that she wanted to do the best at her job, at her work, at her career, but she just needed clarity on priorities and what should drop. And I've got another episode about how to manage your priorities coming up real soon, so that's going to be a page turner for sure. That turned into a really constructive conversation for her, and the workload was adjusted, and the respect was in that moment. She found it really hard to do that conversation and to take part in it. She practiced with me many, many times, until one day I received a text and it was going, I've had the conversation, they've listened to me. She was so happy. I was thrilled for her, and I can't wait to introduce you all to her if we ever get around the manner of her not being a graduate and being fully employed, because I would hate to try and bring some of her stories to life here and not protect her from the workspace. Words matter. The wrong language, the wrong tone can inflame the situation. The right language can help to disarm or diffuse the situation. Here's some practical swaps that you could probably take out your vocabulary and maybe start entering these into your vocabulary instead. And by discussing these on your own, on the car, on the way to work, or on your daily commute, you should start to learn how to use them. Instead of you always, say, I've noticed. Instead of you need to stop, try, can we agree on the following? Instead of that's wrong, try saying, let's look at it a different way. But another powerful tool, use I statements instead of you accusations. For example, I feel concerned when deadlines slip because it affects the whole team. Lands far better in an awkward conversation than this. You're unreliable. So the use of I in statements rather than you are really powerful. Language shapes tone, and the tone would hopefully shape the outcome of that awkward conversation. Let me share 2 real examples. A small business owner I mentored had to let a long-time employee know that their role was changing. Many of you have probably went through this yourself, but they feared the backlash. We spent many nights together and we prepared together, focusing on more of the empathy and the clarity for the discussion. When they had the conversation, the employee actually thanked them, and it kind of knocked him back a little bit. They thanked him for being honest and giving them a chance to adapt. Connection, not conflict. Real powerful. Another example, a graduate who felt undermined by a colleague. They used the framework we discussed, the clarity, the intent, the empathy, and instead of escalating this issue, the relationship improved, and the colleague of hers became an ally, believe it or not. What could have been years of silent frustration has turned out to be a point of collaboration, and I am no doubt that they will be stronger going into things together. Sometimes, despite your best effort, however, the conversation doesn't always go smoothly. That's okay, however. The measure of success isn't whether the other person reacts perfectly. It's whether you showed up with clarity. Did you show up with respect? Did you show up with integrity? Over time, consistency builds trust. If people see you always turning up respectful, with integrity. That will build trust. Even if the first attempt is rocky, people remember honesty, even if it's a really bitter pill to swallow, far more than avoidance. So here's your mission this week. Identify one awkward conversation you've been avoiding for a long time. Write down the issue clearly. Define your positive intent. Choose language that connects rather than attacking the individual. Then schedule the conversation. Don't wait for the right time. There's never going to be a right time for an awkward conversation, let's be honest. It rarely arrives. Take action now. Afterwards, reflect on what went well in that conversation and what you'll adjust for next time. And you'll know what you need to adjust for next time if the conversation didn't go all that well. That's how mastery builds. That's how you become better. That's how you become trusted. That's it for today's CWC Age podcast. Awkward conversations aren't obstacles, remember. They're opportunities, guys. Opportunities to build trust, to strengthen relationships, to create clarity. The leaders, the graduates, the business owners who learn to master them stand out because they do what others avoid. Take initiative. If you want more tools on leadership, resilience, communication, head over to cwcage.com. You'll find loads of free resources. I'm always updating them. You'll find a blog and you'll find ways to connect with me directly, whether you're a CEO, a graduate, service leaver, anyone in between. The ability to turn conflict into connection will give you the edge. And that's what we're here for. Until next time, be clear, be courageous, and keep your edge. Thanks for joining me on this episode of CWC Age Podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you something valuable to take away and put into action. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. You can also connect with me directly at cwcage.com, where I share more insights, tools, and resources. And if you're a podcaster, a leader, a manager, CEO, or professional on a similar journey, I'd love to collaborate. Let's grow together. Until next time, keep pushing forward, keep learning, and remember, growth happens at the edge.